So, Mr. Alessi, you're at the podium. Who is your witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Dr. Marie Russell.
Okay.
Follow me, please. Then you're going to step up and face the court and raise your right hand. Thank you. Thank you.
You solemnly swear the evidence you give to the court and jury in the case now and hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
You may have a seat.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right,
Good morning.
Mr. Alessi, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please state your full name and spell your last name and introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes. Marie Russell. Russell.
Can you summarize your professional background?
Yes, I am an emergency physician and a forensic pathologist.
How long have you been an emergency medicine physician?
For over 30 years.
How long have you been a forensic pathologist?
For over 30 years.
Do you have a medical license?
I do, several.
When were you first licensed to practice medicine?
In 1988.
What medical licenses do you currently hold?
Well, I have a physician and surgeon license in California. I have a medical license in Massachusetts, New York, and Idaho.
Where did you attend college?
I attended both MIT and Northeastern University here in Massachusetts.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I said
Pardon
in
my
Massachusetts.
interruption. Right. When did you attend pre-med, and what was your major for MIT?
Yes, when I was at MIT, that was in 1972 to early 1974, I took pre-med courses. My major was biology, but I took pre-med courses.
Did you obtain a degree from MIT?
No.
Why not?
Unfortunately, my mother became sick with cancer, and I ended up going back to New York.
Where did you ultimately obtain your bachelor's degree, and which degree was it?
Well, after my mother passed away, I came back to Massachusetts, and ultimately I obtained my degree at Northeastern University. And what was the other part of the question?
Did you have any distinction with regard to your degree that you achieved from Northeastern?
Yes, I obtained a bachelor's degree with highest honors.
After college, did you go on to receive a Doctor of Medicine?
Yes.
Where did you attend medical school, and when did you obtain your medical degree?
I attended the University of Massachusetts in Worcester medical school, and I obtained the medical degree in 1987.
Did you complete any residencies, and if you also could just explain to the jury very briefly what a residency is?
Yes. I completed an internship and residency in emergency medicine initially. And what that is internship is and residency both are very intense years of study and training and getting experience in a particular area. So I obtained the I completed the internship and residency in emergency medicine.
Where did you obtain those internships and residencies?
Well, I was interested in emergency medicine, so I went to Los Angeles because they had a very, very busy emergency medicine program.
And it may be obvious, but let's just make it perfectly clear. Why is Los Angeles very busy for an emergency medicine practice?
Well, it's a big city, and in this particular hospital that I was at, it was right in the heart of the city. It was in the, near the downtown, but it was in a very, very busy and underserved area, so it was very busy.
Did you complete any fellowships, and could you please explain to the jury the significance and prestige of a fellowship?
Yes, so after my residency in emergency medicine, I then decided to do a second residency, and that was in pathology, in anatomic pathology. Pathology, of course, is the study of disease, and so I did the 2 years of anatomic pathology, also at the same busy medical center, and after that, I did a fellowship, 2-year fellowship in forensic pathology at the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office.
What did your forensic pathology fellowship involve?
Well, forensic pathology training involves the investigation of deaths, usually sudden and unexpected deaths. And so I investigated many death cases. I performed over 500 autopsies at the medical examiner's office for sudden and unexplained, sometimes very obvious deaths, but sudden deaths. And then in addition to that, there were classroom hours, there was on-scene time, there was time in the crime lab. We spent a week at the crime lab. I spent some time at the FBI. So it was a very, very comprehensive training program.
Approximately how many autopsies were you performing a day?
Oh, usually 1 to 2, unless there was another assignment.
In addition to performing the 1 or 2 autopsies a day, did you attend any conferences or participate in any forensic case discussions as part of the fellowship?
Yes, so it was very organized, and we had conferences on some, mostly Thursdays, but also sometimes on Tuesdays. Interesting case conferences or very structured lectures.
You spoke of cases. Can you briefly tell the jury so they have an understanding of the type of cases that you would typically work on as part of your forensic pathology fellowship?
Well, there were many unexplained deaths, so some of them would be natural deaths in somebody who might be a little younger than usual old age. And then there were cases where there might be a drug overdose. Many cases were accident victims, including car accident victims and other kinds of accidents. There were quite a few homicides, and in fact, many homicides, and quite a few suicides.
Did any of those cases deal with wounds and wound patterns and wound identification?
Many of them, in fact, I would say almost most of them, because part of the examination, and a very important part of the examination, is the external examination of the body. So before I was allowed to even start an autopsy, I had to do a complete external examination of the decedent's body, looking for any kinds of wounds or abnormalities.
We'll come back to wound pattern recognition a little later. But again, I think it's probably clear to most people, but just to be ultimately clear, when you talk about external, can you just elaborate a little what you mean by that?
So the external examination is of the exterior of the body, the skin, the hair, the eyes, looking for, amongst things looking for also would be rashes and scars and those sorts of things. So that's the external examination. In
external, Dr. Russell, is to be contrasted with what?
Oh, with an internal examination. So after all that is done, and there were some other things that had to be done too, like looking at examining the clothing, or looking at x-rays if there were x-rays available from the medical examiner's office, and of course reading the medical record that was available. After all that was done, then I would proceed with the examination of the internal structures of the body, including the organs, the soft tissues and muscles underneath the skin, the bones, etc.
Do you have any certifications?
Quite a few.
Can you name them, please?
Well, I'm
Including board certification. I'm sorry to interrupt you, doctor.
Okay, so I'm board certified in emergency medicine, and that was after the residency training, had to take a qualifying examination, and then I've had to be recertified. I think it's 3 times now. I just recertified again, so I'm certified for another 5 years.
What do you have to do to get board certified and maintain that significant certification?
Well, presently, to get board certified, one has to complete a residency in emergency medicine. And so that is, depending on the program, either 3 or 4 years long. I went to a 4-year program. And then I had to take examination, both a written examination, very long written examination, and then an oral examination where I was questioned by many established emergency physicians on the various kinds of cases that might present to the emergency department. They would give you an unknown, and you would have to talk about how you would care for that person.
Do you have any affiliations with any professional organizations?
Yes. I'm a fellow of the American College of Emergency Physicians. I'm a fellow of the American Academy of Forensic Science. I'm a fellow of the the National Association of Medical Examiners, and then I have some memberships in some other organizations.
What does it take to achieve fellow status that you just mentioned?
So in order to be a fellow, it depends on the organization, but in order to be a fellow, you usually have to be a member for a certain number of years, member in good standing. And then for some of the organizations, you have to have attended some of their national meetings. For some of the other organizations, and possibly have presented a study or a paper or something at the national meeting. Other of those organizations, it's a little bit variable, membership for a certain number of years.
In addition to all of that education, background, experience, do you have any specialized training and experience with regard to investigations of death?
Well, yes. So, again, the focus of the forensic pathology was investigations of death, but also in my job as an emergency physician at the hospital I was at for 29 years, I had both clinical responsibilities, meaning in the ER, taking care of patients, and administrative responsibilities, meaning committees and, office-type work. And so one of my responsibilities during that time was to be director of the Quality Improvement Committee. And as director of the Quality Improvement Committee, of course, I had to do death reviews. So analyzing, studying the people who came to the emergency department and was subsequently either pronounced dead or died in the emergency department.
So now let's move to a slightly different topic. Let's discuss your work experience. What do you currently do for work?
I work for the Medical Board of California, and I do some private consultation work.
Describe your work briefly for the Medical Board of California, including what is the board, what's its responsibilities, and what do you do in your role in working for the Medical Board of California?
So the medical board is a part of government, I think, that is established to basically police the doctors and some other health professionals. So what the role of the medical board is to protect the public health, to protect them from misdeeds by healthcare professionals, particularly doctors. So, would you like me to go on?
So in terms of the medical board, just a last question with regard to that. What type of knowledge do you have to have with regard to the practice of medicine to be able to assist the board in evaluating whether certain doctors have met the standard of care in a whole host of areas of the practice of medicine? What type of knowledge do you have to have?
Well, you certainly have to be up to date. You have to be quite knowledgeable on current treatment standards, what is considered the actual standard practice of medicine, and be up to date on literature and what, things that are currently accepted as the good practice of medicine.
Prior to your current role, where did you work and when?
Well, before becoming a doctor,
Just so we can do it for maybe a little more for the jury, if you could go just before the medical board where you work, or do you want to do it from the beginning? Whatever way is best for you, doctor.
Doesn't really matter. Most recently, I worked for the state of California, the prison system. I was the medical director of the, or what they call the chief medical executive of one of the high security prisons in California. I did that for 5 years after retiring from my Los Angeles County job, which I held for 29 years.
And briefly describe generally your duties in that role.
So as chief medical executive, it was my duty basically to run the medical department. So I hired physicians, I supervised the physicians, made sure that they were providing the standard of care to the inmates that they were assigned to take care of. I reviewed many of their charts. I reviewed transfers and requests for services outside, such as specialty services, orthopedic services, and other kinds of services. And I reviewed every single death that occurred during my years there.
So you just said you investigated every single death that occurred at the prison during your time in that role?
Yes.
Approximately how many death investigations were there that you performed?
I think approximately 60.
Now, did you have any involvement there in examining or identifying wounds of deceased individuals?
I did. My office was in the medical building, and it was very close to what was the equivalent of the urgent care center on site. And so when the patients would come in with an extreme injury, a very serious injury, or near death, I would frequently go over right to the urgent care because that was my specialty. That was, my interest. And even though there was a doctor or another practitioner assigned to care for the patient, I would oversee that. And I would also, examine the patients, look for wounds, look for, signs of injuries. There were some, in some of these cases, there were some deaths, and I would examine those bodies very carefully for any kinds of wounds, just like I had done in the coroner's office for those years.
To move this along, before you became the chief medical executive at Corcoran, where did you work and what did you do? So I worked for 29 years, I worked at what's called the Los Angeles County USC Medical Center. Now, I know that's a lot to say. It was a county hospital that was affiliated with a medical school. It used to be called, prior to that, prior to when I got there, it was called General Hospital. It was a 19-story building, General Hospital. Well, no. And now it's actually called LA General or something of that nature. So, anyways, that's where I worked for 29 years.
And as I said, I had a variety of different roles there.
Can you just briefly name off the roles that you had while at the General Hospital?
So, as I mentioned earlier, there was always a clinical component to what I did. I always had shifts in the emergency department where I had to see patients and supervise interns, residents, physician assistants, nurse practitioners. So in addition to seeing my own patients, I would also supervise them as they were seeing their patients. So that was the clinical role. Then there was an administrative role. And my administrative roles ranged from director of what they called life support training, which provided training to the trauma surgeons and the neurosurgeons regarding things such as advanced trauma life support, and also to ER doctors. So director of life support training, director of QA. For many years I was director of the jail unit, which was a very unique unit at this hospital. For a hospital, it was a very unique unit in that it had three components: a dedicated ER, for jail patients or patients in custody, a dedicated clinic for in custody patients, and a dedicated inpatient. So it's three sections dedicated to in custody services. I was medical director of that for a while.
In addition to all that, were you also a professor?
I was an assistant professor.
Assistant professor. And what did you teach? Just a brief summary of what you taught.
Well, most of my teaching was clinical, bedside teaching, rather than in lecture halls. I would occasionally give lectures to the residents, the residency group, which was about 50 doctors.
And those residents are medical doctors, correct?
Yes, they are. Yes,
Yep.
they are medical doctors. So I would occasionally give lectures to them, but a lot of the teaching was actual bedside teaching.
Switching gears just a little bit and segueing, over your course of your career as an emergency department physician and otherwise, did you treat individuals with animal-inflicted injuries?
Yes.
And did any of those animal-inflicted injuries involve dogs?
Yes.
And generally, is it correct to say that in terms of dogs, there's sort of the canine police dogs, and then there's the civilian dogs with which most people have experience?
Yes.
Are those two categories that you're familiar with, you're comfortable, as we discuss dogs, to have canine versus civilian?
Yes, because the injury patterns are a little different.
Okay. So what is the difference between a canine dog on the one hand and a civilian dog on the other?
Well, generally, civilian dog bites are rather minor, generally. Puncture wounds, maybe, some slight avulsions, skin defects, slight skin defects, usually not major. Whereas in the canine or trained police dog bites, the wounds I saw, were extensive wounds where there was extensive ripping, tearing, crushing of tissue, and many times even injuries to the muscles and blood vessels underneath.
From your experience, do you know why the injuries from a canine dog are as you describe them, as opposed to injuries from a civilian dog?
Well, in the LA area at that time, the dogs were taught to bite and hold. So they would, the canine dogs would get a grip on the individual that they were pursuing, and then hold on, even if the individual was trying to pull away. And so there were oftentimes tearing injuries to those, because that's how the dogs were trained at that time.
Even with canine dogs, did you ever see injuries from canine dogs on humans that were not a complete bite, that were an incomplete bite?
Yes. So if the dog missed on the first attempt at a grab, the teeth might only scratch the surface of the, usually extremity, by the way. And so you get what I consider an incomplete dog bite because it was just scratch marks from the teeth. But the dog would then, try a second time and third time.
Now let's go to civilian dogs, a term used for more dogs of household pets that people have. Can you describe from your experience the type of wounds from those civilian dogs that you would see and contrast it with what you just described for a canine dog?
Generally, they were minor. So a scratch, a puncture wound, maybe a little tearing of the skin, a little skin flap, but generally much, much different.
In your did you say about over 30 years experience in the emergency medicine department?
Mm-hmm.
What did you see more of? Civilian dog wounds on humans or canine wounds?
Actually, it depended on where I was assigned at the time. So in the very beginning, because the jail unit was one of my first assignments, I saw these terrific, horrific wounds, many of them, I learned that what was in the textbooks about how to treat them was so wrong because these patients many of them needed hospital admission, intravenous antibiotics, and many of them needed surgery. And what I was reading in the textbook was, that you could patch them up and clean up the wound and send them home with, sometimes with antibiotics, sometimes without. But anyway, so initially what I was seeing a lot of in the very beginning was the law enforcement dog bites because I was assigned to jail ward. And also I was very interested in this because I used to be a police officer. And before going to medical school, I was a full-time police officer here in Massachusetts for 7 years. And so I had this interest in law enforcement type injuries sustained during the arrest process, et cetera, et cetera.
So you had an early interest in with regard to dog-inflicted wounds on humans and a police officer. Where were you a police officer in Massachusetts and when?
In the city of Malden. I was appointed as first woman police officer in 1977 to 1984, full-time.
And while you were a police officer, were you doing that full-time and anything else while you were a police officer? Were you pursuing school while you were a police officer, your college education, or was it separate?
No, I was a full-time police officer working the night shift. And I was attending Northeastern University part-time during the daytime to pursue my degree.
Were you a sworn duty police officer?
Yes.
Full member of the police force?
Yes.
Did you attend academy?
Yes. I attended the Boston Police Academy.
And how many years were you a Boston police officer?
No,
I'm sorry, I'm not Boston, the Vault.
I was a Malden police officer for 7 years, full-time.
Now let's go back to your emergency department and other experience. Can you approximate how many dog bite injuries you provided treatment for while an emergency department physician?
Overall?
Overall.
Well, I don't know the exact answer, but I estimated it at a very conservative number of 500 dog bites because, would you like my methodology?
Oh, please.
Oh, okay. So I considered that even though I worked there for 29 years, I would take 25 years and 40 weeks out of the year because the other weeks I might be assigned something special, a special rotation or a special assignment or vacation or some kind of course. So 25 years, 40 weeks per year, that's 1,000 weeks. So even if I only saw one dog bite at this busy trauma center, that would be 1,000 dog bites in my career. But I just took it in half. I cut it in half and said I think at least 500.
In addition to the 500, did you oversee other physicians or healthcare professionals like physicians' assistants, nurse practitioners, who themselves were treating and observing dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
Yes.
And approximately, just the number, approximately how many of those, in addition to the 500 you just calculated?
Well, I generally supervised about 3 to 4 people per shift. You know, med students and interns, residents, whatever, all those people. And so I would say very conservatively another 500.
In terms of other work, I want to shift just a little bit in the emergency department. Did you encounter injuries from persons involved in motor vehicle accidents?
Many.
And you mentioned you were in Los Angeles, and in terms of those, can you approximate how many humans you saw and treated and diagnosed in the emergency medicine department from motor vehicle accidents?
Well, it was a very busy level 1 trauma center.
What is a level 1 trauma center?
So level 1 trauma center is the highest designation that a trauma center can have. And there are many requirements in place in order for a medical center to be a level 1, including 24-hour in-house neurosurgery, 24-hour in-house orthopedics, and an active research program, and many, many, many more requirements. And a certain level of training for all of the ER docs and all of the trauma surgeons. So we were level 1 trauma center, one of the busiest in the west of the Mississippi. And we were, the hospital was located near some major freeways. So we saw lots of patients from motor vehicle accidents. But if I were I would say, if I took the 1,000-week number again, if I saw, at least 3, motor vehicle accidents per week, that's 3,000 at least. And that's just me. That's not the interns, residents that I'm working with.
So, shifting again a little bit, as medical director of jail medical services at General Hospital, can you just describe a little bit about the work there, similar to what you just described, or is it a little different?
So in the jail medical services, we dealt with people who were in custody. Some of them were also drunk drivers and under arrest. Some were they're arrested for a variety of reasons. Anyways, and if they were in custody, rather than have them in the main emergency department, we had a special emergency department for them. And so we would see interesting cases there.
In terms of being a professor, is that your time as an adjunct professor at Cal State Los Angeles? Is that where you were an adjunct professor?
Yes. So while I was doing all this, I also had a part-time job teaching a course called Legal Medicine to graduate students, master's level students in the criminalistics master's program at Cal State University.
And in terms of topics, just briefly, some of the topics you would have taught them, and particularly any that may be apropos to why you're here today.
So knowing that many of these students were going to go on to work in crime labs or be crime lab directors someday, what I needed to do was to teach them about the aspects of a crime scene that dealt with a body or someone who was injured or killed, and so we dealt with things such as time of death, postmortem changes, wound wound analysis on the body, looking for different patterns of wounds or types of wounds that could direct them into, to steer them in their investigation. Let's see, so many other things, yeah.
There was a little bit of a noise here when you were talking about wounds and patterns. Could you just repeat that aspect of it?
Sure. So when a criminalist or a crime scene investigator goes to the scene, they have certain duties to attend to, and they need to be aware, that certain kinds of wounds, might indicate certain types of deaths. For instance, gunshot wounds in certain locations, or lacerations or stab wounds in certain locations might mean that this could be a suicide, this could be a homicide. They need to know, if there's something that might look like resemble a bite mark, that maybe that area needs to be swabbed or photographed, especially, and etc. So that's basically. It was very basic, but that's what.
Let's now shift again to your work at the County of Los Angeles Department of the Medical Examiner's Office, or is sometimes called the Coroner's Office. When did you have that work, and what did that position involve?
So that was from 1993 to 1995. And as I mentioned, there was death investigations. I was assigned a certain number of cases myself, but we also reviewed cases that other doctors had. And I, given my curious mind, when I would do my autopsy, I'd also look at whatever other cases were going on. And there was typically 10 to 15 cases going on any given day. And so I learned a lot, not only from my cases, but from other cases.
Did you ever conduct an autopsy of any individual that sustained dog-inflicted wounds?
Yes.
Please describe that autopsy.
That was a case I'll never forget. It was a young boy who had been attacked by 3 dogs, large dogs, but not specifically canine, law enforcement trained dogs, but 3 large dogs. And the wounds there were extensive wounds all over the body, or as best I can remember, including a wide variety: puncture wounds, some scratches, abrasions, contusions. There were a number of different types of wounds.
So let's now go. We've talked about dogs and motor vehicles. I want to go back, please, to motor vehicles. Did you, as a forensic pathologist, did you ever conduct autopsies of decedents that were involved in motor vehicle accidents?
Yes.
Approximately how many?
Hard to say. I'm not sure, really, but probably at least, motor vehicle accidents, probably at least 20 or 30.
Did you conduct autopsies of victims of motor vehicle pedestrian incidents?
Yes.
Now, prior to working at the coroner's office, you worked at the jail emergency department at General Hospital that you described, right?
Yes.
And in that position, did you provide treatments to persons that suffered dog-inflicted injuries?
Yes.
And just approximately how many? And then we'll move on to the next topic.
Approximately, personally myself, about 40, but I was involved I worked as part of a team, and so I think we saw probably about 60 of these severe dog bites.
We're going to shift again to keep it moving. Have you authored or edited any publications on dog-inflicted injuries on humans?
Yes.
And what publications, please?
So I was a co-author on 2 peer review articles, in major emergency medicine journals. One of them was describing the law enforcement dog bites, injury patterns, and another one was more focused on the management of the law enforcement dog bites.
And did you, those are ones you co-authored, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever edit the work of others' articles or books as part of a peer review process?
Yes.
Describe that, please.
Yes. I was asked to be a co-editor of a 2-volume series on forensic emergency medicine in a peer review article series. And one of the chapters in one of those issues was on was on bite wounds. It was written by Dr. Gerald Vale, V-A-L-E, and who is a renowned board-certified forensic odontologist.
In terms of moving now from peer-reviewed articles you co-authored, peer-reviewed books and articles you edited, have you attended any seminars or talks or lectures on wound identification and or bite wounds?
Yes.
Just briefly describe a couple to give the jury a flavor of what those were.
Well, there have been many lectures on wounds of all sorts. And in the emergency medicine program, of course, there were lectures on wounds from various types of animals and how to treat them. In the forensic arena and at some of the professional organizations, there were lectures or talks on wounds, and also there was a yearly talk on bite wounds given by Dr. Vale at the coroner's office.
State perhaps the obvious. Have you had a lifelong interest in dogs and dog-inflicted wounds?
Yes.
And is that a professional and a personal interest?
It's professional.
Right, mostly professional, as you've described it. Let's now keep moving and go to another topic. Have you testified as an expert in court before?
Yes.
Is that in state and federal court?
Yes.
What topics have you testified to in state and federal court?
Causes of death, wounds, child abuse, domestic violence, mostly causes of death.
Have you testified as an expert regarding emergency medicine?
Yes.
Have you testified as an expert regarding forensic pathology?
Yes.
Have you been found to be qualified as an expert in each of those categories in the courts in the United States?
Yes.
Have you ever not been qualified to testify in any court in the United States?
No.
Have you ever testified as an expert regarding identifying dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
No.
And why not?
Because prior to this case, because it's not a topic that comes up very often.
So although it comes up often in your practice, in terms of whether it's an issue in court, is it, my understanding from your answer, it just doesn't come up that frequently?
Correct.
Are you aware of any other physician practitioner that would be testifying in court a lot on this topic, given what you just said about the infrequency of it coming up?
No, I'm not.
Now let's go on to what were in the last question on this line, give a general idea of the types of wounds that were at issue and whether there were any pattern wound issues in those cases that you've testified in court about.
Well, many of them were stab wounds. Some were blunt force wounds from from a variety of mechanisms, including assaults or motor vehicle accidents. Again, a lot of wounds from accidents. And then, of course, gunshot wounds.
Were those, that the topics both living persons as well as deceased?
Yes.
Let's now move to, you've mentioned wound pattern, right? And are you familiar with the topic in the area of wound pattern recognition?
Yes.
Can you please describe for the jury what you mean by wound pattern recognition in your practice and from your experience? What is it generally, and we'll get to some more specifics as we go through.
Well, generally, pattern recognition is very important in medicine. It's important in a lot of different fields of medicine, including radiology. They look for patterns on x-rays. Pathologists under a microscope looks for certain patterns to identify cancerous cells, for instance. So pattern recognition is very important. And then as a subset, wound pattern recognition is of course, very important to physicians that deal with patients that, come in from, from the street, so to speak, from, who may have been assaulted, may have been child abuse victims, may have been domestic violence, elder abuse, those kinds of victims, because sometimes it's important to, or you learn that what actually happened is not what the patient or the relative or the presenter said happened. And so you have to discern or figure out what happened in a case. And so you have to be able to identify certain patterns and regions of the body, for instance, where wounds are, in order to make that happen. And so it's very important. It's emphasized in emergency medicine.
When you were in residency, were you taught wound pattern recognition methodologies?
Yes.
And is wound pattern recognition an area that you continue to learn and then gain experience from your over 30 years as emergency medicine physician?
Yes, it was emphasized in both emergency medicine and forensic pathology, in both fields. Very important.
Is wound pattern recognition a generally accepted methodology that is applied in the practice of medicine?
Yes.
And you've given a few examples of that pattern recognition methodology. Is that pattern recognition methodology generally accepted and discussed in the peer-reviewed medical literature?
It is in certain articles, right. Yes.
And we'll be getting to some of those. In terms of wound pattern recognition, just roughly how frequently in your experience as an emergency medicine physician did you have to exercise your skills in wound pattern recognition?
I would say probably weekly, because I always questioned, what the patient was telling me, and did it fit? Did the story make sense? So I did it quite often.
And was that particularly important in child abuse cases where you may not be getting the story and you'd have to look at wounds and make your own determination?
Yes.
Now let's go and slightly move on to a very similar topic as to whether you ever had to determine the source of the wound without any input from a patient.
Oh, yes, many times. Many patients arrive to the emergency department unconscious.
And that's one
Yeah.
example of others. And with regard to language barriers, did you ever encounter that as an obstacle to you understanding what may have happened and you therefore had to exercise your pattern recognition skills?
Yes.
So now in terms of dog bites specifically, how often, if at all, did you have to look at a patient without input from anyone to determine whether it was from a dog?
Occasionally.
And can you recall any specific instance, or is it just you're recalling that you generally had to do it, but you can't recall a specific instance?
The second of that, that I generally had to do it. Sometimes, you know, there was a language barrier, and people couldn't describe what it was that bit them. And it was important to know, because treatment for different types of bite wounds is very, very different.
And to be fair to the situation, you can't give any one specific. You remember this person was this age, etc., but you know that you did that on more than one. I'll withdraw that and go to the next area. Let's now talk about wound pattern recognition in the area of forensic pathology. What role does pattern recognition play in forensic injury analysis? And could you please just let the jury know what you mean by forensic injury analysis as regards pattern recognition?
Okay, so forensic analysis, or forensic injury analysis, is the analysis of injuries from a medical legal perspective. In some areas of medicine, the doctors are taught to just treat the injuries, and no figuring out about how it happened or what caused the injuries, so much as they treat. But in my case, both the emergency department and the forensic pathology training, I was interested in how the injury happened. That was a very important factor to me.
Why is pattern recognition important in the field of forensic pathology?
Well, you could look at a wound all by itself, an abrasion, for instance. Abrasion is a scratch. And in and of itself, it might not tell you how the wound occurred, all by itself. But if there are a series of scratches or a series of lacerations or cuts, they can tell you more about how it happened.
And have you applied wound pattern recognition skills in your practice as a forensic pathologist?
Many times.
Could you just give the jury a flavor by just a few examples? Maybe two.
Okay. Self-defense wounds, for instance. An issue comes up often in court. If certain wounds were inflicted on purpose versus were they inflicted self-defense, and things like appearance and location can help you determine that. What was the question again?
It's just a few examples of applying pattern recognition skills in forensic pathology.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, doctor.
Oh, more?
No, more, yes.
Oh, yeah. Motor vehicle accidents, people who are struck by cars. There are certain patterns that one expects to see when a individual is struck by a car. And we're taught, to look for certain patterns, and that can help you determine if they were struck by a car.
In terms of motor vehicle accidents and patterns, can you give an example of some of the patterns you would expect to see in someone, and that you have seen in someone that is struck by a motor vehicle?
Oftentimes lower extremity fractures, for instance. Lower extremity bruises and fractures are commonplace for someone who is struck by a car.
And in your practice as an emergency medicine physician, a rough approximation of how many lower extremity injuries you have examined and evaluated with regard to motor vehicle accidents, including in the Los Angeles area?
Oh, I think probably hundreds.
Alrighty, so now let's continue with the topic that you were talking about. You called it defense injuries and wounds. I want to cover that topic. Are you familiar with the term posterior surface?
Yes, in terms of anatomy?
In terms of human anatomy, and with Your Honor's permission, could Dr. Russell point to her arm to show what she's referring to with regard to posterior surface for a defense injury?
Sure, go right ahead.
Let me explain just in general.
Sure.
Anterior is the front of the body. And
Excuse me, Dr. Russell, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you want to stand up so the
Yeah,
jury, with Your Honor's
yeah.
permission.
Yes, are you
Okay.
comfortable standing up and doing this?
Yes.
Okay.
So many years ago, anatomists decided on a nomenclature for describing parts of the body, and so the way the body the descriptions go is that you take a person in what they call the standard anatomic position, which is upright with their arms, their palms facing forward. Palms facing forward. So that is the standard anatomic position. So anything in the front is anterior. Anything in the back is posterior.
Could you point to the arm when you talk about anterior and posterior, please?
Yes. So with regard to the arm, if the palm is facing forward, that's the anterior. So the posterior part of the arm would be the back part that I'm touching right now. This back part of the arm and the back part of the forearm would be right here. So that's the posterior of the arm.
And what relation does the posterior of the arm have in determining whether or not a wound is a defensive wound?
Well, oftentimes, when someone is being attacked, they will put their arm up to defend or protect their face, their neck, their chest, their vital organs, their vital parts of their body. So they put their arms up. And in doing so, the posterior part of the arm becomes presented to whoever is attacking them or whatever is attacking them. So this is the part of the arm that oftentimes gets injured when someone is defending themselves.
Thank you, Doctor. How often have you observed and concluded regarding defensive wounds to the forearm?
Many times. I don't know. I don't have a number. 20, 30, I don't know. In terms of decedents. And then in terms of live people, many, many more.
And if we just start with the posterior part of the forearm that you've described and you encounter wounds there, are those wounds indicative or highly indicative of anything?
Well, they're indicative of defensive wounds being caused during a defensive action.
In your experience as a resident, a fellow, emergency room physician, and a forensic pathologist, and your time at Cochrane, have you experienced and taught the topic of defensive wounds?
Yes.
Now let's move on to another topic. Do you have knowledge of the dental features of dogs?
Yes.
Where did you gain your knowledge about the dental features of dogs?
Generally from reading articles.
And in terms of examining patients with dog-inflicted wounds, did that inform you anything about dog dentition or not?
Not specifically.
In terms of dog dentition, Your Honor, may I approach?
Okay.
Thank you. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I have this depiction marked as an exhibit for identification?
Okay. So, for ID?
For ID only, yes.
Put 000 for identification.
Thank you, Madam Court Reporter. Your Honor, may I hand it to the witness? I'm handing you Dr. Russell what has been marked for identification as 000 as in orange. Dr. Russell, do you recognize that depiction?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a diagram of canine dental anatomy.
And could you please, just for the jury, briefly describe dog dentition and what we mean by the term dentition? I think most know, but just for the record.
So I believe dentition just means the teeth and the shape of the teeth and of the mouth of the animal or person. And what this diagram shows is that in general, dogs tend to have a triangular mouth, meaning it comes to a narrowing towards the front of the mouth. It shows how many teeth a normal dog will have, and what they look like. There are different kinds of teeth, just like humans have different kinds of teeth.
In Your Honor, to assist the jury in the understanding of what Dr. Russell was speaking about, with Your Honor's permission, could we publish this as a chalk for the jury?
Is there any objection?
None, thank you.
Okay. Sure, go right ahead.
Thank
Mr.
you, Your
Wilson.
Honor. And will enlarge, Mr. Woke, the Dr. Russell, where would you like to start with regard to this, just to give the jury a brief discussion of dog dentition? Which part of this should we zoom in on?
I think the lower half around the triangular upper and lower jaws, right there.
Right there? Very
Yeah.
good. And Mr. Woke, if you could just, to start with, pull it down just so we can see the headings, and more importantly, the jury can see the headings of those two diagrams that Dr. Russell has pointed out. Yes, and just enlarge that. Can you read what's on the left and what's on the right? It's slightly blurry.
It's slightly blurry.
Mandible, lower jaw, maxilla, upper jaw.
Yes, I can
got
read
that
it.
right. Alrighty. So if we could then just reduce it back down so it's a little bit so that it's not distorted. And then Dr. Russell, if you could just talk about it. And before we do that, I think it would be helpful, Dr. Russell, we can go to the depiction up above just to get the overall picture up above there of the dog. All right. Is that that's an overall picture, correct? Do you want to point out anything generally on that picture?
I don't have a pointer, but generally it's a side view, and it shows and it's a skeletal view, so there's no skin, and it shows that there are some prominent teeth. They're called the canine teeth, and then there are some smaller teeth in front of that. Or
Excuse me if I couldn't interrupt. Pardon my interruption.
Yes.
I'm just going to try to locate in the courtroom a pointer, Your Honor, if there's.
There's nothing on that, Mr. and Dr. Nurse?
I've got one, Your Honor. May I approach? If there's one on the
No.
Yeah, I didn't see it. May I approach, Your Honor? Thank you. Here, Dr. Russell. Hopefully
Okay.
that will work for you. Thank you. Excuse me.
Okay, so this is a side view, and it shows many teeth, and and this is a skeletal view, obviously, and it shows these prominent teeth, which are called the canine teeth. Humans also have canine teeth, and ours are not quite as prominent. And then there are some teeth in front of that, which are called incisors. So that's the overview.
Right. And just to put this in context, we are looking at this and talking about dogs. Have you had the opportunity to review any photos of the right arm of the decedent in this case?
Yes.
Is one of the topics you're going to address whether those wounds are from a dog?
Yes.
And so this background in terms of dog dentition part of what you're going to cover for the jury later on?
Yes, and I want to make one more comment, if I may.
Please.
Just when a dog bites, they usually don't bite with all of their teeth. They usually don't get all the teeth impacted on the individual. So that's important to know. Oftentimes it's the anterior or the front teeth.
Why, doctor, is it the case that a dog doesn't always have a complete bite, get all of the teeth? Why is that the case?
Well, there's oftentimes movement. Oftentimes the dogs aren't really trained on biting techniques. And so, there's oftentimes the person who's being bitten is pulling away and trying to avoid the bite. So oftentimes there's only impact with a few of the teeth in the front.
Great. Please continue, doctor, with your...
Dr. Russell, could I ask you to use this screen?
Oh, yes.
The other one, please. I think it's easier for counsel.
Oh, okay. So overview, these large canine teeth, these are the anterior teeth, and as I said, it's very rare for all the teeth to be involved in the bite. It's usually just the front teeth and canine teeth.
Are there certain teeth that are on this depiction that cause certain types of injuries, abrasions, tears, punctures? Is there any relation to the teeth in any of those categories, or can it be just general?
Well, oftentimes, because the canine teeth are so long compared to the others, they are the ones that seem to cause the the puncture wounds, and those are the ones that appear to get the grip on the person's skin.
Is there a medical term for a puncture wound from a canine? Or is it just it's a punctate wound from canines?
I'm not sure there's a medical term.
Okay, please continue.
Okay. Well, that's about it on this side view.
And is there any other view on the exhibit that you would like to discuss with the jury?
Well, I was going to show that it's triangular. Again, the upper and lower jaws. Yeah, they tend to be somewhat triangular.
Is that also sometimes the shape referred to as an hourglass, or is it triangular, or you prefer triangular?
I've heard it referred to as hourglass. I don't see an hourglass, but maybe in some dog breeds, because the different dog breeds have different shapes of their mouths. But this is just a generalization.
Okay, please continue.
I don't know that there's anything else.
Alrighty. And so you
think...
actually,
yes. So here you can see... Go back, please. So here you can see, again, the canines, and it's oftentimes this is the upper jaw, the maxilla jaw. It's oftentimes these teeth that do the impacting.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you say it's often these teeth that what?
That do the impact. The upper jaw is oftentimes the part that actually makes contact with the skin. That's all.
Thank you. We can take that down. Mr. Woke, thank you, Your Honor. Now let's go to dog-inflicted injuries on humans generally. What type of injuries to humans can be caused by dog-inflicted bites?
Well, there are lots of different types of injuries. So they could be extremely minor, from a minor scratch to puncture wounds by individual teeth, to actual puncture and punctures by several teeth. There could be several abrasions because there are multiple teeth involved, and if they don't puncture, they at least scratch. They can scratch the skin. That's what I call abrasion, is a scratch. So they scratch the skin, but in parallel, because the teeth are lined up. So they oftentimes have parallel lines. And then, of course, there are bruises that could occur because of the crushing injury, and there can be what we call avulsions, which are where an actual flap of the skin is removed, and I can go further, but there's a wide extent of injuries.
So there's a wide extent, a wide range, and can you just give one or two factors that are going to determine whether you're on the more minor side of the range to the more major part as regard to the type of bite that the dog is able to get?
Well, I think that when there is penetration of the skin and pulling away of some of the tissue, I would consider that a more significant bite because of what's needed for treatment.
Just bear a moment, please. Thank you. So, in terms of the nails and claws of a dog, what type of injury, if any, can those cause?
So the nails they're also somewhat pointy or triangular in configuration or shape, and so they can cause scratches, and actually they can cause even deeper wounds if the nail catches the victim's skin a certain way. But most of the time, just scratches.
From your experience, what type of medical experience, peer-reviewed article experience, your whole professional experience with dog-inflicted wounds on humans, do you have experience with just a part of the range or the whole range of injuries that a dog can inflict?
Well, I think I have a very wide range of experiences because those very serious ones we talked about in the very beginning, where there were crushing and ripping injuries, or those were the trained canine dog bites. Most emergency physicians don't even get to see those. They're so uncommon. But because I was assigned to jail ward, that's how I got seen. But in the majority, in the main ER, most ERs in our main ER, we saw the more minor type of injuries.
So, in terms of if someone is bitten by a dog, where are they? Again, I think most people understand this, but just to be clear for the record, when someone gets a dog-inflicted wound, where do they usually go?
Well,
Sustained. Ask it to
Doctor, are you aware of the medical facility, from your experience, where people go who have dog-inflicted wounds?
well, if they feel like they need medical care, they will either go to a family doctor or most likely the emergency department, because the emergency department is where the resources are, the people that with the experience. They go to the emergency department in general.
From your experience, for people in your literature review and authoring of documents, do people with dog-inflicted wounds go to a veterinarian for treatment?
I'll let you answer it.
Not from my experience.
All right, now let's move to another category, and to keep this moving along. How did you initially become involved in this case?
Well, very interesting. I live in Los Angeles, and I saw something in the Boston Globe about this case, but I really didn't pay much attention to it. And then eventually I saw or heard something, because I'm not from this part of the Massachusetts. I'm from a different part of Massachusetts. So anyways, eventually I heard or saw something about there being an issue with some possible dog-inflicted injuries versus maybe car-inflicted injuries. So that got my attention. I thought, that's interesting. And so that's how I initially became aware of the case.
Let's talk about the Boston Globe. How is a person from Los Angeles reading the Boston Globe, and why? Is it like a one-time thing, or why is it you're reading the Boston Globe?
I had a subscription. I would, not always read it. I lived in Massachusetts. I went to school in Massachusetts. I worked in Massachusetts as a police officer. So I have some interest in Massachusetts, but None of that was in this geographic area. It was all north of Boston. So that was the area I mostly paid attention to.
Did you reach out to anyone after reading that article? And what do you recall from the article in the Boston Globe, if anything?
I'm going to sustain that objection.
Did you reach out to anyone after having read something in the Boston Globe?
Yes. Again, I thought the question was interesting.
Objection.
I'll let that stand, but just answer Mr. Alessi's question,
Yes.
please.
Yes, I did.
Go ahead. Andrew.
Okay. Yes, I reached out to one of the DAs in Los Angeles County.
And at that point, what, if anything, did you know about this case?
I didn't know much. I just knew what I mentioned, and I knew that the decedent was a police officer, had been a police officer, and that interested me also because I was a police officer.
Please keep your voice up, Dr. Russell.
I said that interested me also because I had been a police officer at the time.
Go ahead.
So that's about all I knew, really.
Right. So, did you know anything about what the prosecution was claiming or the defense was claiming at all? Did you know anything?
Objection.
Sustain.
What did you know, if anything, about the case?
I'm going to see its sidebar really quickly on this.
Dr. In terms of, Mr. Wolk, if we could please, and Your Honor, may we publish what is already in evidence, which is Exhibit 167?
Okay.
Dr. Russell, do you recognize Exhibit 167?
Yes.
And how do you recognize that? Well, first let's start, what is it, and then how do you recognize it?
It is a picture of the decedent's right arm and forearm.
Now, without stating what it is, have you been able to form an opinion as to the source and nature of the wounds that are depicted in that exhibit?
Yes.
Now, in terms of the next area, can you describe for the jury what method you used in forming your opinion without yet stating what your opinion is?
Well, I used pattern recognition and differential diagnosis.
So let's start with wound pattern recognition. Is that the wound pattern recognition you've been discussing up to this point in your testimony?
Yes.
And did I hear you use the phrase differential diagnosis?
Yes.
Please tell the jury what you mean by the term differential diagnosis as a physician, emergency medicine physician and forensic pathologist.
So when a patient, when a physician sees a patient and, or, an Imogen's case, and is attempting to make a diagnosis, it's very important that not only do they consider what they believe is the obvious, but also in their mind go through other possible diagnoses and determine if they can rule them out, so to speak. If they can rule them in, rule them out, so that they are not just focused on one thing, but they've actually given consideration to other conditions that may be causing whatever it is that they see.
So, Mr. Wolk, if you could take that, we're going to come back to this back and forth, but I'd like to have it taken down until we do have the need to, and if we could have the lights go back on, Your Honor. Thank you. So, does applying a differential diagnosis, well, let me start out. Do you understand what confirmation bias is?
I believe so.
Yes. And does differential diagnosis assist or not assist in avoiding confirmation bias?
I believe it assists in avoiding confirmation bias.
So in terms of differential diagnosis, did you apply that concept in the beginning of your analysis of this case?
Yes.
How did you apply differential diagnosis to, among other things, avoid confirmation bias in this case?
Well, in my mind, I went through other possible things or causes of wounds on an arm, and what they would look like, and the configuration, the patterns, etc. And then I figured out why these other potential causes of wounds in the arm did not fit this case.
So is a phraseology a synonym for differential diagnosis, what doctors call ruling out something? Is that another way to say it as well?
Yes.
So we're going to come back to the differential diagnosis. I just wanted to have that question first. Now let's switch to the materials that you considered in forming your opinion about the nature and source of the wounds to Mr. O'Keefe. Describe what you looked at in terms of coming to your opinion, conducting a differential diagnosis, and avoiding confirmation bias. What did you look at?
Well, I looked at pictures similar to this. So there were pictures taken at the hospital. There were pictures taken at the medical examiner's office. I looked at the medical records. I looked at the autopsy report. And I looked at other reports from the Massachusetts State Police. And then, those are some of the things I looked at.
Did you look at any photographs, including of clothing?
Of what?
Clothing?
Oh, yeah, clothing. Clothing, of course.
What clothing did you look at?
So there was a shirt, like a hoodie shirt, that I looked at that had many defects in it.
And when you say defects, what do you mean by defects? Is there a more layperson's term?
Holes?
Thank you. Did you look at any history of any dogs with regard to any municipalities and dog incidents?
I'm going to sustain that, Mr. Leslie.
Did you look at any municipal records with regard to your review in this case?
So that's sustained.
With regard to other documents, if any, could you describe any other documents that you looked at?
Well, I also...
I'm going to see you at Tyrone.
May I continue, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience, Dr. Russell. We had broke off where you had described the materials that you had reviewed. Based on your, and Mr. Woke, if we could please put the exhibit that we just had, and with Your Honor's permission, republish it. Thank you. Based on your review of all the materials that you had described and your experience that you had described, without stating it, were you able to come to any conclusions or opinions about the source and nature of the injuries that you see depicted on that exhibit?
Yes.
And what is your opinion and conclusion concerning those injuries?
Those wounds were inflicted as the result of a dog attack.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you speak a little louder?
They were inflicted as the result of a dog attack.
And how did you form that opinion? Just describe your thought process to the jury.
Well, there are multiple groupings of wounds.
Do you have the pointer?
I
there?
do.
And if you could use the screen that Her Honor has requested.
So there are multiple groupings of wounds right here. Here's one on the what I'll consider the upper arm, which is above the elbow. Here's another grouping. Here's an interesting, complex grouping at the elbow. These are all at the posterior surface of the arm. And there's another grouping down here on the forearm. These multiple groupings are patterns. And they are, in my opinion, were inflicted by the teeth and claws of a dog.
We've discussed previously pattern recognition skills and methodology, and you just mentioned the word pattern here. Can you elaborate on what you mean by pattern with regard to this exhibit?
So there are groupings, and one can see that these wounds are going essentially in the same direction. They are oriented in the same way almost from the inner, close to the inner surface of the arm or the anterior surface towards the posterior surface.
What is
of
the
arm.
significance, if any, of that orientation you just described?
So what that gives me direction, and that tells me that the dog's teeth were over here. The dog is over on this side of the arm, and the teeth started their punctures or their injuries over here, and through either the action of the dog or a combination of the action of the dog and the action of the decedent pulling away, or the victim pulling away, the teeth made these abrasions in this direction, from here down to here. And then here it's very complex because of the bending of the elbow. We don't know the exact configuration of what this elbow was in the arm. Was it fully extended, meaning it's fully stretched out, or was it partially bent? Was it fully bent? We don't know. But in addition to the pulling away movement, there's also the bending movement. So that one is even a little bit more complex. And of course, there are some additional marks down here and some possible bruising down here, punctate marks down here, which may represent the lower teeth.
If we could just stop at that area, have you observed in your experience what you call that complex area pattern? Have you seen that before?
Not that exact pattern, no.
But have you seen any that is similar to it?
I've seen some characteristics of these patterns before,
Right.
yes.
And it is the appropriate methodology to zero in on one section, or is the appropriate pattern methodology to look at all the wounds and then reach a conclusion?
The second, to look at all the wounds.
And
Okay,
could you
so-
please describe?
Why don't we take our recess?
Okay, Your Honor.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Alessi, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon and welcome back, Dr. Russell.
Good afternoon.
Your Honor, if we could please publish Exhibit 1 in evidence.
Okay?
Mr. Wolk. Dr. Russell, do you recognize Exhibit 1 from your review of the documents in this case?
Yes.
And what is it that Exhibit 1 represents?
It's a picture of the forearm of the decedent.
And we left off at lunch, and I'm not going to cover too much old ground, just to reorient ourselves back to where we were. You were discussing the basis of your opinion and conclusion that you said that these wounds were caused by, why don't you restate, well, let's continue on in the basis of your opinion. Let's just continue on. Can you go through what is in Exhibit 1 and describe how it is that you came to your opinion?
Well, I observed multiple patterns of striations or linear abrasions.
I'm sorry to interrupt you so soon. Do you have the pointer in case you want to use that available?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's multiple groupings of linear abrasions, and linear means like a line, linear. So there's multiple of those, and here's one. Here's another one closer to the elbow. Here's another one closer to the wrist. And here's another array of linear abrasions near the elbow.
In terms of these wounds, in assessing their source, do you look at them individually, collectively, or both?
Both. I look at them individually, and then I put them in context of how they relate to one another.
And how they relate to one another, is there a name of that methodology that you use in terms of how they relate to each other?
Well, I think it's a pattern methodology, pattern recognition.
And what pattern is it that you see here with regard to all of these wounds on the right arm?
Well, I see multiple linear groupings together in a area from the mid-arm to the mid-forearm.
Is there any analysis of direction that is involved in your analysis?
Yes.
What is it?
I believe that these wounds were initiated closer to the anterior surface or the front of the forearm.
I'm sorry, Dr. Russell, to interrupt you, but there's a fan back here which I can hear, but if you could just keep your voice up, that would be great for me.
Yes, I believe they all started closer to the anterior or front portion of the arm. Like they started up here, up here, and the direction is towards the posterior portion of the arm.
Now, if we could just go back briefly, I want you to do a comparison. If we could go back, Your Honor, please, back to Exhibit 157 that we had up earlier.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 167. As between 167 and 1, which one is closer in time to when Mr. O'Keefe was located?
The previous one.
All right, so let's go back to the previous one. So that one is closer in time to when Mr. O'Keefe was located on January 29 of 2022, correct?
Yes.
And so January 29, 2022, if we can go back to Exhibit 157, or 67, excuse me, 167, can you tell when this picture was taken from the depiction?
Well, it says January 31st.
Okay, so is that the basis for you saying that the Exhibit 1 was closer in time to when Mr. O'Keefe was located?
Yes.
All right, so I want to do another comparison, have you do another comparison of the two. If you can look at what is depicted in Exhibit 167, and now go back to 1 and see if you see any differences at all as to what's depicted. Do you see any differences with regard to the wounds on the arm, or the arm just in general? Let's go back to, see that now, let's go back to 167.
Well, the coloration of the photograph is slightly different.
And what do you mean the coloration?
Well, the skin tones here are more yellow than they are in the previous photograph.
And what?
And-
I'm sorry. What is? Do you have a conclusion as to why there is a difference in skin tone in this exhibit compared to Exhibit 1?
Well, it could just be technique, lighting technique. I do see some lividity on the chest, postmortem lividity, and that's what that means is pooling of the blood, which happens after death.
Can you explain to the jury what lividity is?
Yes. So, blood follows the laws of gravity, and the blood will settle to the dependent parts of the body. In this case, the body the body of Mr. O'Keefe is horizontal, and so the blood is going to settle from the top of the chest, which would probably be up here somewhere, down towards the back, which would be the inferior portion of the chest in that position. And likewise, it would happen on the extremities too.
So, you just mentioned the extremities. Do you see any lividity on the extremity here, the right arm?
You know, actually, there is discoloration over here in the elbow area. I do see some lividity. Okay, so there's several areas of lividity on the arm. I'm sorry. There's some right here. This redness right here on the near the wrist. I believe that that's postmortem lividity. I believe that this redness in here near the elbow is also postmortem lividity, and yeah, that's what I believe.
Okay.
That's postmortem lividity.
And again, lividity is that you said something that sets in after time, after death?
Yes, it's the pooling of blood.
Is there, with regard to this depiction, do you see any bruising with regard to that elbow?
You know, I think that initially, earlier this morning, with the lighting, I may have said that this was bruising, but now as I think about it, and I see all this other lividity here, lividity over here, I believe that's postmortem lividity.
And if we could go back to Exhibit 1, and you said this is the one that's closer in time to when Mr. O'Keefe was located, do you see any lividity or bruising with regard to that photo?
I don't see any definite bruising. I do see some discoloration up here near the shoulder. I'm not sure if that's postmortem lividity or not. It could be early postmortem lividity.
Okay. So if we could, thank you, Mr. Woe, can we take that depiction down for the moment? What I'd like to do is to, and we'll come back to that. If we could have the lights back on, please. Thank you. Have you had experience prior to this case in performing your pattern recognition methodology skills with regard to dog-inflicted wounds on humans? In other words, have you seen dog-inflicted wounds that have a pattern on humans?
I've seen dog wounds that have had a pattern. I didn't need to do it utilize that skill because I also had other information about the case. You know, for instance, the police officer or the victim himself said, you know, I was attacked by a dog.
Right. And for those that can you give an example, like in the ER, just as to how you would come to have that knowledge or otherwise? How would you generally come to have the knowledge as to a potential source of the wound?
Oftentimes it's the victim that tells me, or in the case of the law enforcement dog bites, I had both victim and police officers tell me that the police dog, inflicted these wounds.
And so and how many times generally in your career, we discussed it this morning, how many times generally did someone present with dog-inflicted wounds and you were told that these wounds were from a dog? Roughly how many in your career?
Well, all of the law enforcement dog bites, so that would be 40 to 60 or so of those, plus most of the non-law enforcement dog bites, the patients or the mother have said, this, a dog bit me or a dog bit my son.
And for those where someone said something, the dog bit my son, were the wounds that you saw similar to or different from the wounds that are depicted in Exhibit 1 that we've had up on the screen?
On the civilian dog bites, there's some similarities, but not as many striations on the civilian dog bites.
And are the more striations on what's depicted in Exhibit 1, does that lead you to more easily conclude it's from a dog bite, or is it harder for you to conclude it's from a dog bite?
Neither.
Right. So is your prior experience as an emergency room physician, as a physician in Cochrane, does that experience allow you to exercise pattern recognition skills with regard to Exhibit 1 in Exhibit 157?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you use your pattern recognition, did you use your pattern recognition skills in evaluating Exhibit 1 in Exhibit 157?
Yes.
In terms of characteristics of dog bites, if we can go back to Exhibit 1, please. Is Exhibit 1 highly characteristic of a dog bite or lowly characteristic of a dog bite?
Yes.
Sustained.
How would you describe the characteristics of what appears on Exhibit 1?
What I see on Exhibit 1 is multiple strikes from a dog.
I'm going to allow it.
Can you please repeat your answer?
Yes.
What you see?
Multiple strikes from a dog.
And with regard to, do you see any characteristics in terms of a medical observation with regard to those strikes?
I don't understand the
Okay.
question.
Are you familiar with the medical term pathognomonic?
Oh, yes.
What is the definition of pathognomonic?
Pathognomonic in medicine means that the characteristics of a condition are so highly specific and unique that they basically say that it can only be from a certain condition and no other condition. So to the exclusion of all other conditions. That's what is meant by pathognomonic. At least that's my understanding.
Do you consider these wounds pathognomonic?
Yes.
Sustained.
How do you evaluate these wounds in terms of what you call their characteristics?
I characterize them as highly specific for a dog attack.
Objection.
I'm going to strike the last word, Mr. Wilson.
In terms of the characteristics that you have talked about, Are there any other aspects of dog dentition that you can discern from Exhibit 1?
I don't understand the question.
You mentioned earlier when we had the dog dentition exhibit up, you mentioned an arch. Is there any aspect of Exhibit 1 that concerns an arch?
Yes. There is, in my opinion, an arch-like structure right here towards the lower part of the forearm, towards the wrist, suggesting that this here is made from the very front teeth of the dog. Now, when one looks at these injuries or wounds, one has to remember that, number one, this is not a mannequin. This is a person whose skin is somewhat elastic, whose skin will slide over the underlying bones, and so therefore some of the wounds may have been created by the exact same teeth, for instance, but look differently, depending on the part of the anatomy, the elasticity of the skin, also depending on things like if there was clothing or something in between the teeth and the skin. So one has to consider and also there may be motion motion effects. The living victim could have been pulling away from the dog. The dog could have been, pulling or jumping and only catching a glimpse, a little slight bit of the skin with his teeth. So there's a lot of movement and things that one has to consider when an injury is inflicted on a body.
Objection, move to strike.
I'm going to strike that.
Can we approach, Your Honor?
Sure.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. If we could put the Exhibit 1 back up on the screen, please, Mr. Wolf. Dr. Russell, is what's depicted on the screen one dog bite or more than one dog bite?
Objection.
Ask it differently, Mr. Wilson.
Dr. Russell, can you determine from this depiction, how do you evaluate this depiction with regard to dog bites?
Well, I see several groupings of wounds. Here's one grouping up near the shoulder. Here's another distinct grouping near the elbow, but above the elbow. Here is a third grouping around the back of the elbow and the upper forearm. Here's some additional marks. I think they're separate, but I don't know exactly if they are separate dog bites or scratches. And then there's another grouping around the posterior forearm near the wrist. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's at least 4 different types of either bites or combination bite and claw marks.
You mentioned claw marks. Is there any evidence of claw marks in this exhibit?
It's hard to say exactly what what these marks are. This one here, and even to a certain extent, this one here has some characteristics of both claw marks and bites. So,
Even though you may not be able to determine whether it's a claw mark, can you determine, or the specific type of mark, can you determine that those are from a dog?
I believe they are, yes.
So now let's go. You mentioned, we'll switch, we can leave that up for just a moment, because we're going to come right back to it. And Dr. Russell, earlier on you used the phrase incomplete dental impression. Do you recall that?
Something like that, yes.
Yeah. What phrase would you like to use? Because you were describing whether a dog or not had a complete bite. What phrase would you like to use?
That's okay. Incomplete bite, I
Okay.
might
Do you
consider.
see any evidence of an incomplete bite on Exhibit 1?
I believe all of the bites here are incomplete.
Why do you come to that conclusion?
Because, in my opinion, they don't penetrate the skin, which I would consider more of a bite or more of a complete bite. So they're just scratches on the surface of the skin.
When you say they don't penetrate the skin, we see the marks that are on there. What do you mean that they don't penetrate the skin?
They don't penetrate the full thickness of the skin and extend into the soft tissue underneath.
And what, in terms of incompleteness that you just described, have you observed incomplete dog bites in your career?
Many.
Roughly how many incomplete dog bites have you observed and treated in your career?
Over 100.
In our incomplete bites, the majority of bites from civilian dogs, or are they a minority of the bites from civilian dogs?
I believe they're the majority of the bites of civilian dogs.
Did you determine whether these wounds occurred at the same time?
I believe they did.
Why do you come to the conclusion that they occurred at the same time?
Because of the wound characteristics, the coloration of the wounds, the tissue reaction to the wounds. So they all timing are at the same time, around the same time.
Did you determine whether these wounds were sustained by Mr. O'Keefe before or after he died?
Before he died.
How do you reach the conclusion that these wounds were suffered by Mr. O'Keefe before he died?
Because they have what we call a vital reaction. So there is an ever so slight vital reaction or inflammation around the edges of the wounds. And so that determines that, that supports the fact that they were inflicted during life.
Dr. Russell, did you observe Mr. O'Keefe's right arm personally?
No.
Is it generally accepted in the practice of medicine, particularly emergency or pathology, to observe and determine the source of a wound from a photograph after death?
It is generally accepted.
And have you, in your career, used photographs to determine wounds and patterns of wounds?
Yes.
And is that an accepted practice?
Yes.
And it is a generally accepted practice?
Yes.
Now, in conducting we're going to switch a little bit now to what you call the differential diagnosis. In conducting your differential diagnosis with regard to motor vehicle accidents, describe for the jury how you performed that differential diagnosis with regard to the decedent. And we can leave that up for just a moment. Go ahead, Dr. Russell.
Objection.
So I'm going to need to see you. Sorry, folks.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
With Your Honor's permission to republish Exhibit 1. Thank you for your patience, Dr. Russell. Is what the wounds you see on Exhibit 1 consistent or inconsistent with what you have seen from your experience with regard to motor vehicle accident victims?
Inconsistent.
If I could have published Exhibit 206, which is in evidence, Your Honor.
Okay.
Do you recognize Exhibit 206?
Yes.
Did you review that as part of any report in this case?
Yes.
And can you describe how you reviewed this document as part of your evaluation of this case?
Well, I reviewed the injuries, which are so this is a decedent, a picture of a decedent, a different case, not the decedent in this case, totally separate case.
And
So
is this from Dr. Welcher's report that you reviewed?
Yes.
All right, so continue, please.
And so this is a person deceased, looks like in the street, and he's got multiple injuries. And this is allegedly from an auto versus pedestrian accident.
So if we could, are you able to discern any injuries to any limbs from this? If you could zoom in on the limbs, Mr. Wolk, thank you.
So there is a very extensive degloving, partially degloving, avulsion injury to the forearm of this individual, the extensive skin loss, damage to the subcutaneous tissue, possibly damage to other tissues beneath that.
And Mr. Wolk, if you could zoom back out and go to the list that is highlighted in the original of this. And Dr. Russell, can you tell me whether you evaluated the list, and if so, how did you evaluate that list in connection with the photo?
Well, the photo is limited only really to the upper chest and the right arm. And so I can't comment on any of the CAT scan findings here on this list. But this is a list of numerous traumatic injuries to this person. And regarding the arm, it says right upper extremity wound with vascular injury, clinical.
What does that mean, if anything, to you?
Well, that suggests it's a soft tissue wound. However, what they're saying is clinical, so they're not commenting on if there were any X-ray findings, for instance. On an X-ray, but I mean would be a post-mortem X-ray. And this is just a clinical diagnosis or a visual hands-on diagnosis.
Do you know whether that line that you just read relates to any part of the photograph? Any part of the photograph?
Well, I believe it relates to that injury that we pointed out in the previous photograph.
Can you switch back to that, please, Mr. Wolf? And if you could just zoom in and just what does...
So this is the wound that they are talking about. It's a large gaping wound, soft tissue wound.
If we could go back to the list, please. Zoom in. Thank you.
But
Please continue.
no. What I was going to say is that there are multiple other injuries in this person. Multiple serious, significant injuries, subdural hemorrhage, subarachnoid hemorrhage, intraventricular hemorrhage, liver laceration, pneumothorax. That's blood and air in the chest cavity outside of the lungs. So it's in an area where it shouldn't be. This person had numerous injuries.
Are you able to compare these injuries and that photo in this Exhibit 206, and did you compare them to your review of the autopsy report and other medical records of Mr. O'Keefe?
Sustained.
Answer the question? Oh. Okay.
You can take that down. From your review, did Mr. O'Keefe sustain any liver laceration?
No.
Did Mr. O'Keefe sustain any gaping, as you called it, lacerations to the right forearm?
No.
Did Mr. O'Keefe sustain any pneumothorax injuries that you were describing with regard to 206?
No hemopneumothorax.
Let's switch to another topic. Let's talk about clothing of the decedent. In forming your opinion, did you consider Mr. O'Keefe's clothing in relation to his wounds?
Yes.
If we could, Your Honor, have Exhibit 150 in evidence published.
Okay.
Do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 150?
Yes.
And what is it?
It's a picture of part of the hoodie, sweatshirt or shirt that Mr. O'Keefe was wearing at the time.
And wearing when?
At the time of his death.
And did you evaluate this photo as part of your review of the autopsy report?
Yes.
And we're going to come back to this. If we could please switch to, Your Honor, 147C in evidence.
Okay.
Thank you. And what is 147C?
So this is a close-up of the sleeve of that shirt that we just saw on the previous image. And there's a hole or defect here in the sleeve, which I'm circling with the pointer. And there's a label that labels it number 1. And so I see this hole that is rather round and appears to have some fabric coming out of the hole towards the exterior of the jacket or the shirt.
Did you attribute any significance to the shape of the wound, and if so, what significance?
The shape of the hole, yes. So it's rounded. I actually attributed a lot of significance to that.
Describe a lot of significance that you attributed to this hole.
Well, I believe that this hole was made by a canine tooth, and with the tooth going into the shirt, reaching the skin, and then coming out of the shirt, pulling out some fabric with it.
And we'll come back to this. If we could, Mr. Wolk, go to 147D as in David that's in evidence. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
What is it?
A round hole in the shirt, again with some fabric fibers pointing towards the outside of the shirt.
Is this the same hole that we just saw on 147C or a different hole?
Could we go back? I don't know.
Okay, so let's now go back to Exhibit 150. What significance, if any, do you give to the various triangles that are on the hoodie? Could you describe to the jury what those are and what's their purpose?
So the triangles are labels that were placed by either the police or the crime lab or someone, and the point of the triangle generally is pointing towards a hole in the shirt. As you can see, there are multiple ones here, and I want to make sure that you don't confuse it with this rather large defect, which is caused by something else.
So let's start with each one, and we'll go through these quickly. Let's start and zoom in on number 1. What did you conclude about the source of that hole in the hoodie?
Sustained.
Did you evaluate what is depicted as number 1 in that slide as part of your review?
Yes.
And what was your evaluation?
Sustained.
Let's go back and zoom out. Have you in your career examined clothing either as part of your forensic pathology practice or your emergency medicine practice to determine the source of defects in clothing?
Yes.
How many times have you done that approximately in your career?
Several hundred.
And have you, in those several hundred times, have you ever had to reach a conclusion as to whether there was any connection between defects in clothing and wounds to humans?
Many times.
Can you give some examples of the many times you've had to look at clothing and defects in clothing to assist you in determining wound recognition in a human?
Yes. So let me clarify. It's mostly used in forensic pathology, not so much in emergency medicine. The clothing and the cause of the wound is as important as in emergency medicine as the treatment of the wound. But in forensic pathology, it's a key component to any examination where you think that it was an unnatural death. So I've done it in gunshot wounds, in stab wounds, multiple times, looking at the defects, looking at the direction of the of what I think the bullet track was, determining entry and exit wounds. In stab wounds, I've utilized them to help determine offensive and defensive wounds or injuries. So yes, many times.
Have you ever performed that analysis? You testified earlier, 500 to 1,000 evaluations of dog-inflicted wounds on humans. Have you ever performed the analysis of defects in clothing and compared them to wounds on humans in the context of dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
I don't think so. Perhaps.
Well, yes. So in terms of, have there been any instances of doing that in your career? Have you done that at all in your career?
Maybe that one child case.
All right. So let's go now to you were discussing the defects in the arm as well as the wounds in the arm and then the defects in the clothing. In terms of back to Exhibit 1. In terms of that pattern that is in the arm, and in terms, let's go back to the hoodie. I'll strike that. Have you, in your career, in the terms of evaluating motor vehicle accidents, have you evaluated the clothing of victims of motor vehicle accidents?
Yes.
How many times roughly have you evaluated what clothing looks like in terms of motor vehicle accidents?
Well, in many cases, I had to cut off the clothing in the emergency department, so I observed the clothing then. And then in the post-mortem cases, I evaluated the clothing, but oftentimes, sometimes it wasn't helpful.
Have you ever evaluated clothing in determining whether or not the defects in the clothing are consistent or inconsistent with a motor vehicle accident? Have you ever evaluated that as a forensic pathologist?
Not specifically.
Right. And in terms of your observations in either emergency medicine or forensic pathology, have you ever observed defects from motor vehicle accidents in clothing?
Yes.
Is what is depicted in this exhibit consistent or inconsistent with a motor vehicle accident?
Sustained.
In determining, let's go back to Exhibit 1, please. In determining and reaching your opinion with regard to the source of these wounds, is it necessary for you to reach that opinion to see a specific dog to determine whether the wounds are from a dog in general?
No.
And in your experience that you talked about earlier today, the 500 to 1,000, was it ever necessary in that experience to go locate the dog, to see the dog, to treat or evaluate the patient?
No.
Why is it, well, in terms of, we're going to move to another category, studies. Did you review any studies informing your opinions in this case?
Can we put the lights on and take this?
Yeah,
down,
yes,
Mr.
thank you,
Leslie?
Your Honor. Yes.
Yes, many.
And did those studies that you review support or not support your conclusions in this case?
Objection.
Sustained.
Which studies did you rely upon?
Well, I reviewed quite a few, 10 to 20 in depth, and I relied a lot on 2 of the articles.
Do you recall the names of the lead authors in the studies that you said, that you just referenced?
Yes, one of them was Demuniak.
Could you spell that, please?
I wish. Demunnyck, I believe.
And was there...
And then there was another one, Pollack, Pollack.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, my recollection is correct. We've already pre-marked as exhibits for identification these studies, 2 studies. I may be incorrect in that. If so, I have studies. I'm going to show them to Mr. Yes, thank you. So we can just make sure I have all the pages. Do you have these handed out for the order?
Oh, I have none.
Okay.
So if I can just have a moment, Your Honor.
Okay, I've got them. These are them. If I could have marked for identification as one document, please.
Exhibit PPP for ID. Exhibit QQQ for ID.
Mr. Alessi and the court reporters down.
Sure. Yes, Your Honor.
Which is what?
Exhibit PPP is the Demunic,
Okay.
and Exhibit QQQ is Pollock, and those are the lead author names. You're welcome. Yeah, I leave them with the witness, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Russell, I have provided you with those two exhibits. I would ask you to just briefly take a look at them and let me know whether you recognize those as the articles that you were referencing before.
Yes.
Now let's start out with the Demunic study. Is that exhibit PPP?
PP.
Right. So is this the study that you referenced earlier in your testimony?
Yes.
Can you briefly describe for the jury how that study related to the opinions in this case?
Objection.
Sustained.
Are these the studies that you cite to as a basis for support for your opinions in this case?
Yes.
And is QQQ a study that also supports your opinion in this case?
Yes.
Now, in terms of your conclusions with regard to, if we can go back once more to exhibit number 1. With regard to your opinion on the cause of these injuries, can you once again state your opinion as to the cause of these injuries?
I believe these injuries were caused by a dog attack.
So I'm going to strike that word.
Yeah, so Dr. Russell, if you could, with regard to bite parlance, can you state what your opinion is with regard to bite? So do you have an opinion as to what caused these injuries?
Yes. I believe that these injuries are the result of dog bites and or claw marks.
And do you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
That is all the questions I have for this witness at this time.
All right. Thank you.
You want these? Okay.
May I?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Russell.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brennan.
Dr. Russell, we've met before.
Yes.
I've asked you questions before,
Yes.
and you've testified before where I've had a chance to ask you about some of your statements and opinions, haven't I?
Yes.
Before this case, had you ever testified as an expert in dog bites in any federal court in the United States?
No.
Before this case, had you ever testified in any state court in anywhere in the country as an expert in dog bites?
No.
Other than this case, have you ever testified in a courtroom as an expert about dog bites?
No.
Last year, you learned that there was litigation regarding this case, Commonwealth versus Karen Reed, correct?
Yes.
You learned a little bit of information about it, and it piqued your interest, didn't it?
Yes.
Did you know that the case was receiving a lot of attention?
No.
Did you know that it was on television?
I had no idea until I got here.
You spoke to a colleague in Los Angeles, correct?
I'm sorry, I spoke to who?
A colleague?
I spoke to a district attorney in Los Angeles.
And did you just bring up the subject, or did that person bring it up to you?
I brought it up.
When you brought that up, is it because you knew of the relationship between that district attorney and somebody on the defense team?
Yes.
You wanted to get involved in this high-profile case, didn't you?
No.
Well, you weren't called by anybody on the defense and retained as an expert in the traditional sense, were you?
That's correct.
It was after you reached out yourself and interjected yourself into this case, true?
I did so for a reason, and the reason being that I knew I was one of the only people in the United States board certified and residency trained in emergency medicine and also residency trained in forensic pathology, and therefore I had a unique skill or knowledge set, and I was one of the very few people that had the knowledge of dog bites, as well as those other trainings.
And because of the fact that you held this opinion about yourself, you wanted to get involved in this very high-profile case, didn't you?
I thought I could help clarify the issues as to whether or not this could be a dog bite, and maybe they could move on to something else if it wasn't.
Did you want to get involved?
No, not really.
Inevitably, you got hired by the defense, didn't you?
Yes, I reluctantly agreed.
And they paid for your time?
They are paying for the time.
Yes. Did you know that there was a relationship between the district attorney you spoke to in California and somebody on this defense table?
I know, yes.
So when you spoke to the district attorney, did you have the hope that they would reach out on your behalf to get you involved in this case?
As I said, I hoped that they could reach out to the team and I could help clarify issues so that they could move on. If it wasn't, if these weren't dog bites, then no sense spending a whole bunch of time on it.
After you testified in this case last year, you then began to advertise yourself as a dog bite expert, didn't you?
I had advertised myself many years ago as a dog bite expert, I think. I'm not sure, but yes, I did advertise myself as a emergency medicine and forensic pathology expert.
Did you take
with other, sub interests?
Sure. Did you take a photograph of you testifying at trial and put it on a website to promote your accomplishments?
It's a listing service for physicians, and yes, there is a photograph.
So you took a photograph from your participation in this event,
Yes, that's there.
and you used that photograph in your participation at this event to try to procure future work, didn't you?
I wouldn't say that that was the reason, no.
When you listed a number of things that you have experience in after this case, you then added that you were an expert in dog bites, didn't you?
I believe I am an expert in dog bites, yes.
But after this case, and after you took the photograph from this case, and after you created this advertising, you then added the fact that you were an expert in dog bites, didn't you?
It was all at the same time, and it was submitted at the same time.
Right. After this case, after you participated or
Well-
volunteered to involve yourself in this case, you then used it as a marketing opportunity, didn't you?
Well, I also I had retired from my full-time job, and I had time, and I wanted to get more involved in some forensic legal cases, and not specifically dog bite cases. I have much more experience with other cases.
Undoubtedly. I respect that. But simply, after you testified in this case, you did use your participation as a way to try to garner future interest in cases and income, didn't you?
I did, but I did not mention this case.
Have you testified in any other court since this case as a dog bite expert?
No.
You had written a few articles that were peer-reviewed on dog bites back in, is it the 1990s?
Yes.
And they involved law enforcement canines?
Yes.
And you describe in those articles how a law enforcement canine grabs and holds. Is that the technique they call it?
Yes.
Where they lock their jaw and then they pull and hold on to the subject that they're attacking or holding?
Yes, that's what they were trained to do back then.
And you would agree that there's a difference between, generally, the way a domestic dog bites and a law enforcement dog bites?
Generally, yes.
Since those two articles in 1990, have you authored anything else regarding dog bites?
No.
You had mentioned that you had gone to seminars regarding identification. Now, I had a chance to ask you a number of months ago about some details about training and education you have on pattern recognition analysis as it specifically relates to dog bites. Remember I asked you those questions a number of months ago?
I believe you did.
And I'd asked you if you could give us any specific listed trainings that you had regarding pattern recognition analysis of dog bites. And at that time, you did not have any names of any classes or seminars or certificates that you have. You mentioned again today that you have attended seminars regarding dog identification analysis. Do you now know some of those trainings and seminars? And are any of those listed on your CV?
The trainings that I went to on bite marks in general, they were bite marks in general, and included things like how to determine what was a human bite, how to differentiate a human bite from a dog bite. But no, I did not specifically attend seminars limited to dog bites only. However, actually, there was one this past February that I did attend at the American Academy of Forensic Science.
Over your many, many decades, you did not attend any seminars on pattern recognition analysis of dog bites, did you?
Of specifically dog bites? No.
I only want to talk about dog bites. I know you're well trained and educated. I respect that, but I want to talk about dog bites. You didn't attain any certificates in pattern recognition analysis of dog bites, did you?
I don't think there are any that exist, any training programs like that.
In fact, forensically, have you ever been presented with a wound and been asked to determine whether or not the source of it was a dog bite, other than right here in this very case? Have you ever been asked to do that in your entire history?
In my clinical career, perhaps once or twice, but not, not that I can give you a specific name.
Well, the couple times, tell us what stands out. When were you asked ever, over your entire career, to do a forensic evaluation of a wound and identify whether it was a dog bite? When did that happen?
A forensic evaluation? No, never.
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 Okay.
It just doesn't come up.
Okay. And so this is the first shot, the first crack you've had at looking at a photograph and trying to make a determination based just on a photograph whether or not the wound is generated from a particular mechanism, and in this case, your opinion, a dog bite.
No, actually, I disagree. I've been taking photographs of dog bites since the 1990s.
And when you took the photographs, you knew they were dog bites.
I did know that there were dog bites,
Have you
yes. I have a collection.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
That was it.
Okay. So not when you knew it was a dog bite and you took a photo. I know you have an interest. I'm asking, other than this case, there was never, ever a time in your career where you were presented with a photo and asked to give an opinion whether the mechanism of injury was a dog bite, other than this case?
That's correct.
So this is not a pattern recognition analysis engagement that you have any experience in before this effort?
I've recognized that pattern many times.
I appreciate your opinion, but I want to ask my question. You do not have experience over your long, accomplished career in the effort of pattern recognition analysis of dog bite wounds. Isn't that fair to say?
Okay.
You mentioned before, and you just mentioned again, so I want to ask you some more questions. You believe that you are uniquely qualified to look at a photograph and give an opinion about the source of the injury.
I'm not uniquely qualified. That's done all the time in forensic pathology. Many forensic pathologists do that.
Did you just say you're one of the very few physicians in the United States who has both the forensic and the clinical experience to look at a photograph and make a determination, the mechanism of injury?
No, I said, if I said that, then that was incorrect. I meant dog bites. Dog bites. But your question just now was not specific to dog bites.
Right.
Postmortem photographs are used all the time in forensic pathology for second opinions.
You're right. My apologies. Did you say today and before, have you said that you believe you're one of only few physicians in the United States who could authoritatively distinguish between causes of wounds when it relates to dog bites?
I did say that, and that's because of my unique training. I don't know of another doctor in the whole United States that did 2 residencies, one in emergency medicine and one in forensic pathology, and has a lifelong interest in dog bites.
So, Dr. Russell, from your perspective, as far as you know, you were the only person in the entire United States of America who was qualified to look at a photograph and make a determination whether the wound was derived from a dog bite.
No, I am I'm the only physician that I know of that can do that. There may be, a few others out there. There may be, but I don't know of any other physicians that can do that.
Do you recognize anybody other than yourself who has this very particular expertise to be able to do this kind of work?
I'm not aware of anyone.
You were a medical examiner, a forensic pathologist,
Yes.
and you know there's about, or would you agree there's probably about 900 to 1,000 medical examiners around the country at the same time over a period of time?
I believe that there might be, there's probably, I think there's around 500 or 600 practicing forensic pathologists.
And do you think because they are forensic pathologists, those 500 or 600 people have the unique qualifications as you do to be able to give an opinion about the genesis of a wound?
Wounds in general, perhaps. Dog bite wounds, I doubt that very many of them have a specific interest in dog bite wounds.
And so you think that of all those forensic pathologists, medical examiners, you think that qualification and experience itself is not enough to qualify somebody to give an opinion on a photograph about the genesis of a wound related to dog bites?
Well, if a forensic pathologist has autopsied 1 or 2 cases of dog bite wounds versus my experience with over 500 to 1,000 cases of dog bite wounds, I'm not so sure that person would be a very good expert in that kind of a case.
Have you ever heard of a doctor named Dr. La Posada?
I've heard of Dr. La Posada.
Have you ever read any reports by Dr. La Posada?
No.
Has anybody ever shared with you any information or opinions of Dr. La Posada?
I believe she has a very good reputation.
Have you ever, well, how do you believe that? Who told you
Because I've heard of her name at national organizations. I believe she's given presentations nationally. I've seen her name, over a dozen years or so.
Do you know whether or not she has any participation in this case?
I believe she does.
Well, so you know when you're providing accolades that she has maybe some involvement in this case? Do you know that?
I would provide those same accolades if she didn't have involvement in this case.
Do you know that she has involvement in this case?
I believe she does. The attorneys have not shared everything with me
Well-
in terms of who the witnesses are.
Somebody must have shared her name. Who shared her name with you?
I'm very familiar with her name outside this case.
Who shared her name that she may be a participant in this case?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Well, somebody might.
I think I got a file or something, but yeah.
So when you were reviewing this case, did you get materials from any of the attorneys authored by Dr. LaPosada?
I don't think I read a report. I was very interested in reading a report by Dr. LaPosada. I was very interested, but I didn't see one.
So when you received materials in this case, you didn't read all the materials the defense gave you?
I don't believe they gave me the report.
What report?
Any report that Dr. LaPosada might have written.
Do you know whether or not you've received the report or not?
I received something that had her name on it. I don't remember what it was, but I was looking for a medical examiner's or a report, an actual report, and I did not see one.
Dr. Russell, you are meticulous when you look and examine things.
Right.
So you would know what you've received and what you've read and what you haven't. So the fact that you're telling us that you saw something with her name on it, can you give us a little more information and share with us what it is you actually received about this Dr. LaPosada? What did you get from the defense?
I saw something. I think it was the name of a file folder, but I looked for a report and there was no report in it.
Did you ever ask for one?
I didn't ask because I didn't ask. I really wanted to read it, but I didn't. It wasn't given to me, so I didn't ask.
Were you ever told what other people's opinions might be regarding those photographs?
I'm aware that there was a Dr. Sheridan involved in a previous proceeding, and he believed that those were consistent with dog bites.
Did you ever receive any reports from the defense about what other persons' opinions would be in this trial about dog bites?
Oh, yes, I received a report authored by a non-physician, yes.
So when you say non-physician, you're trying to make the point because you think that person might be your opponent in this case?
I don't have any opponents.
Okay, so why did you qualify him as a non-physician?
Because I believe that in order to really understand wounds on a human being, one needs to have treated wounds, seen lots of wounds, and I think that the person that is best qualified for that is a physician.
So a medical examiner wouldn't cut it, in your opinion?
Medical examiner is a physician.
So you think a medical examiner has enough experience to come in and give an opinion on
So-
dog bites?
Some, but in their case, I would hope that they have had actual clinical experience with autopsying some cases where there were dog bite wounds, because I don't think they worked in the emergency room or any other clinical setting where they treated people. So I'd want to see if they had experience with dog bites.
Non-doctor as a disqualification. How about a dog trainer? Would a dog trainer who's not a doctor have the experience in your mind to come in and give an opinion about photographs and the genesis of the wounds?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow it.
How about a non-doctor, as you said, you've made a distinction.
Uh-huh.
They're simply a dog trainer, maybe even an uncertified dog trainer. Would that person have the qualifications in your mind to be able to look at photographs and determine whether or not the cause of the injury is a dog bite?
There may be a certain small subset of people who have, very much experience with dog bites that could qualify, as suggesting that these are consistent with dog bites. But I don't think that they could definitively. I think that someone could, who dealt with many dog bites in the past on humans. could possibly say that they were consistent with.
even if they didn't have the clinical experience?
Well, I'd prefer that to hear that information from a physician, but I wouldn't rule out that only doctors, only a physician, MD, could say that something was a dog bite.
It seems like the standard is now kind of changing a little bit. Because when I asked you,
Sustain.
you mentioned the other person, you disqualified the person because they weren't a doctor. And it seems now in some instances, you're willing to accept a non-doctor into your very select group of experts.
If someone, well, I can explain. If someone had looked at perhaps hundreds and hundreds of wounds inflicted by a dog that they know was inflicted by a dog, and they saw the resulting photographs on a person, I think that particular person may be able to make some comment as to whether or not some wounds are consistent. However, if in terms of a medical examiner, if they've autopsied one case or two cases of dog bites and they're trying to testify based on some pictures, I would be a little concerned about that.
Does qualification for this type of business, in your mind, depend on who hires you?
Absolutely not.
Suffice to say, you've never taken a class in the forensic analysis of dog bites.
I don't think any class exists.
But I'm asking about your experience.
Well, that's correct.
You haven't, have you?
That's correct. I can't take a course that doesn't exist.
You've never engaged in any type of opinion looking at photographs and then had that opinion peer reviewed by other dog bite experts, have you?
No.
Do you have any experience in veterinarian medicine?
I'm aware of it. That's my experience.
Do you have any accomplishments like degrees?
No.
Now, you've testified a number of times in this case, haven't you?
Yes.
And when you testify, you know there's a court reporter and there are transcripts, correct?
Yes.
You originally testified when you first came out and volunteered to testify last year, and there was a hearing before trial, wasn't there?
Excuse me? Say again,
When
please.
you volunteered to come out last year, there was a hearing before you testified at trial, wasn't there?
Yes.
Do you remember that was on June 18, 2022?
Sounds right.
And then you testified at trial on June 21st, 2022.
Yes.
I didn't have the privilege of meeting you on either of those events, did I?
No.
But since then, we have met,
Yes.
and we had a chance to speak at a subsequent hearing on December 12, 2024.
Yes.
And then after that, we again had an opportunity to discuss this on January 7, 2025.
Yes.
When you reviewed the case, when you first reviewed it before you testified last year, you had very limited information, didn't you?
Yes.
You had just an autopsy report, photographs from the coroner, photographs from the hospital, an emergency room report. Yes?
Yes, I had more than that.
The medical examiner file had a toxicology report.
Yes, and there was more.
Okay.
I believe there was a dog bite, town of Canton report.
Okay. So when you had an opportunity to look at the medical examiner's report, you yourself had been a medical examiner, correct?
Yes.
And there's a unique advantage of actually conducting an autopsy as opposed to just looking at photographs, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
And if you are actually conducting the autopsy, you firsthand can make observations about injuries, make measurements, and see things that don't always appear in photographs.
That's correct.
And when you would do medical exams, you had a distinct advantage over people who would later see your work, a written report, or photographs, because you were there actually conducting the investigation.
Yes.
And it's for that reason that when you testified before, you have acknowledged that you relied on Dr. Scorti-Bello's report for information,
Yes.
because you didn't have the benefit of doing measurements or looking at depths or anything else firsthand.
Yes, correct.
And when you looked at that photograph that you discussed with the jury, you also had a chance to see Dr. Scortibello's report regarding the abrasions on Mr. O'Keefe's arm.
Yes,
She described those abrasions as superficial, didn't she?
yes,
She actually gave measurements, 3 centimeter superficial abrasion on the right medial upper arm. Right?
yes.
You not only read that, you deferred to her ability to have a first-hand observation, and you accepted that as true, didn't you?
Yes, but there's no interpretation of that abrasion.
Multiple abrasions from 2 to 3 millimeters and up to 7 centimeters on the posterior right arm and forearm.
Yes,
Did you read that from
I
Dr.
did.
Scortibello?
yes,
Did you accept her finding and observation?
Yes.
And you would agree she was in a far superior position than you when she made these observations and notes, correct?
they are not inconsistent with what I said.
That's not what I asked, though.
Okay,
Sorry, I didn't mean to be sharp.
Okay.
I apologize. Did you rely on her ability and first-hand observation of those wounds?
yes,
And did you appreciate or accept the fact she had a superior opportunity to evaluate those wounds firsthand that you did not have the benefit of?
she made no interpretation of those ones.
Well, did you know that Dr. Scortibello had described them as superficial?
They are.
Did you know that she said there was no depth and no puncture?
Not inconsistent with what I said.
I understand, doctor, but I'm asking you, do you
I-
know that her position is that there was no puncture and no depth to those wounds?
Objection, Your Honor. Can we have the witness see the report that he keeps referring to?
Can you answer that question without seeing it, or do you need to see it?
Well, I remember it, but there's no inconsistency here. I agree with that.
Would you accept that Dr. Scortibello's opinion is that there was no depth and no puncture to those wounds?
May I see the report?
It might not be in the report. I'm asking about any testimony, anything that she's ever said. Would you agree or accept her position that there is no puncture or depth to those wounds?
Objection, Your Honor. I'd like all the questions that were about an autopsy. Yes. Sidebar, please.
Okay.
May I?
Yes, please.
Dr. Russell, I read to you the measurements that were in Dr. Scortibello's report. Are you aware that she testified that these superficial abrasions did not have any depth or any puncture?
I don't recall that.
Well, would you agree if Dr. Scortibello testified in this court that those superficial abrasions did not have any puncture or depth? Would you agree with that assessment?
Objection, Your Honor.
In that form, it's sustained.
Would you agree that the superficial abrasions on Mr. O'Keefe's arm had no punctures?
I agree.
Would you agree that the abrasions, the superficial abrasions on Mr. O'Keefe's arm had no depth?
No measurable depth, yes.
Between the last time you testified and then you testified here today, have you spoken to the attorneys at all regarding the issue of punctures?
No.
Because you are agreeing today that those superficial abrasions did not have any punctures, right?
They don't appear to have any punctures.
But you, in the past, have testified very, very differently than that, haven't you?
No.
Now, we've spoken many times. I'm going to go through many of those examples later, but we'll do that a little bit later, Dr. Russell. Over the course of your many testimonies under oath, would it be fair to say that you have changed your opinions about the superficial abrasions to John O'Keefe's arm many times?
I don't believe that's fair to say.
In the past, when you were describing Mr. O'Keefe's superficial abrasions on his arm, did you give varying and different opinions about the cause of each individual wound, area of wound?
I don't believe so.
When you first gave opinions, that was before the last proceeding. You came in and you were questioned before you testified in that initial proceeding, right? I'm trying to be as specific as I can. You testified last year?
Yes.
And before- Please.
There was a hearing and then there was a proceeding.
Okay. That prior hearing, can we call the first event the prior hearing and the next one the prior proceeding?
I'm confused.
I don't want to confuse you. I'm just trying to follow the rules. You testified twice last year, didn't you?
3 times.
3 times. Okay. The first time you testified was just before the judge?
Yes.
Okay. When you first testified before the judge, do you remember that you had uncertainty about how each and every one of those wounds was caused?
I don't remember that.
And do you remember when you then testified a couple days later at the proceeding that some of your opinions changed from the first time you testified?
I don't believe that.
And then when you later met me and we've had a chance to talk over the last 2 events, December and January, would it be fair to say that your opinions regarding the individual areas of wound changed?
I don't believe so.
Okay. At some point before or during our conversations in December and January, you wrote a report, didn't you?
Yes.
When you wrote that report, you hadn't written a report before the first time you came in and testified, had you?
That's correct.
And it was between those hearings in December and in January where you wrote your first report.
Sounds correct.
You dated that report December 9, 2024. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
When you wrote that report, you did not write that report alone, did you?
I did.
You had some help, didn't you?
Not in the content of the report.
Well, you sent the report back a number of times for review and revisions, didn't you?
In terms of organization.
And some of the language in this report is really not your language. It's the language of somebody who helped you write some of this, isn't it?
You know, if somebody helped me write it, it would have been much better written than that.
Didn't you agree that you had some assistance with the report? Haven't you testified to that before?
And no, and in terms of organization, there was some comments, though, this sentence belongs, you know, with this paragraph or the, you know, whatever. But in terms of content, that was my work.
Well, it was your report, correct?
It's my report.
And when you write a report, it's your words, not somebody else's. Isn't that true?
That's correct.
But nevertheless, you had somebody assisting you. True.
In terms of organization, yes.
Who was helping you with the report?
It was somebody from the law office.
Well, it was this gentleman right here, Attorney Alisi, who just asked you questions. He helped
No,
you, didn't he?
actually, it wasn't.
Was it from his law firm that somebody helped you?
I believe so, but it was in terms of organization.
Do you remember who was helping you with your report?
I don't remember her name.
Would you agree that after that report was written, many of your opinions changed?
No.
In your report, you provide your background. Yes?
Yes.
And you've been licensed to practice medicine since 1988
Yes.
as a physician?
Yes.
And you've been licensed to practice medicine as a surgeon?
It's called, in California, it's called physician and surgeon license.
Do you have a physician and surgeon's license?
I do.
Okay. Have you ever practiced as a surgeon?
Well, in the emergency department, we do surgery. We have to do some surgery sometimes. We have to open up people's chests and, you know, and compress the heart sometimes when they have gunshot wounds to the chest. I've had to put chest tubes in. I've had to debride dog bite wounds and other wounds. So yes, there is a component of surgery.
If you do stitches, that's considered surgery, isn't it?
Maybe.
Well, medically speaking, stitches is surgery.
I don't know. Maybe.
Okay. Do you have a surgeon's license?
I have a physician and surgeon's license in California.
Now, when you first looked at this case and testified, do you remember when you were looking at Mr. O'Keefe's superficial wounds, you said that you thought they appeared to be consistent with an animal attack?
I do remember that.
And when you were describing animal attack, you were a lot less specific than you were today, weren't you?
Yes.
You were less sure about your opinion when you first testified about this case than you provided to this jury today.
I was certain that it was a dog attack. However, as I mentioned before to you, in medicine, we're taught never, nothing is 100%, and therefore never say, anything's 100%. So that's why I gave that generalization. However, I have reviewed the case, but I personally was certain that those were dog marks. Now, I have reviewed this case over and over and over again. Plus, I've read additional articles more than once, and which substantiate, again, my findings. So my degree of certainty perhaps increased.
So when you first testified in this case, back in June of 2022, are you agreeing that your testimony was less certain than today?
I believed that it was a dog attack at that time.
When you testified, you didn't say dog attack, you said animal attack at the beginning, didn't you?
Yes.
And when you were asked about the cause, you said that it could be bite or scratch wounds.
Correct.
So back in June, when you were looking at individual wounds, you, at that time anyways, were unable to differentiate between bite and scratch wounds.
They are very similar.
I understand, but today you seem pretty unequivocal. So I want to go back to the beginning and see the evolution. I'm asking a question.
All right. So the argumentative part is out. Ask the question, Mr. Blair.
I want to go back to identify the evolution of your opinions. So let's start at the beginning.
So, question, please.
At the beginning, before your opinion evolved, you started with an opinion that this could have been either bite or scratch wounds, right?
Yes.
And if there was actually a methodology where you could identify superficial abrasions and make a determination whether it was from an animal or a dog, there would be something definitive, specific, where you could identify a scratch from a bite wound, wouldn't there be?
Not unless there was a piece of tooth in the wound or a piece of nail. There would otherwise not be any specificity.
You talked about patterns when you first testified back in June of last year.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talked about the patterns, again, you had some uncertainty whether those patterns were caused by nails, claws, or could have been caused by teeth. Isn't that fair to say originally that was your position?
Yes, there is some overlap in terms of the appearances. They can appear very similar, and they can be arranged very similar in terms of parallel lines.
In fact, when you first testified, you weren't consistently even saying that it was a dog, or as you say today, dog attack. You were saying, in your opinion, that they were the result of animal bites or scratches. That was what you originally opined, isn't it?
We just went through that, yes.
And at some point, you said that it might most likely be a large dog. Do you remember that?
Objection, Your Honor. Can we approach with regard to this line of questioning?
So why don't we break for today?